Practical, so if I could request David to get the bed here in the meantime and prepare for it. Some of the things we would come back to it, and the idea of this talk is the emphasis on the multidisciplinary approach. So as Fiona said, a doctor won't be able to do things on his own, a nurse cannot, a physiotherapist cannot, an occupational therapist cannot, but when we all come together, then it's that 95% of prevention we can do. So that's what is the whole idea behind this hands-on. So this is skin care and positioning in bed. So we would be covering again why is it important to look after the skin, what can go wrong, how our pressure ulcers develop, what is the role of a physiotherapist, what is the role of the nurse, role of an occupational therapist in prevention, and what is the role of the family members, the carers, the patient themselves. Because as I said, if we empower our patients on complications and how to prevent, half of the problem is solved because they're in charge, right? So we would bring the bed here. So I don't think we all have a chance to have a go at it, but we'll do the demonstration. So skin is a vital part of the body. We all would agree on that. It is a biggest barrier against graft.
René,
No, no, sorry.
don't forget your microphone.
Yep.
Excuse me. Excuse me. This, you're right here, like this. Put the camera here. No, because it's really direct.
That's very nice. Sunanda, we had some pillows as well. Right, so it is the barrier against bacteria, and it protects organs inside the body. It regulates temperature, keeps our body cool when it's very hot, and keeps our body warm when it's cold. But we'll talk about what happens when a person has spinal cord injury. Sensation, it sends information, pain, temperature, touch, back to the brain. So all these functions, I'm not going to go much detail in what the skin, the layers of the skin, but this is pretty much how the skin looks like. So what happens after spinal cord injury? We can make it interactive, so pour in your ideas. What do you think will happen when a person has spinal cord injury in terms of function of the skin? The messages are not going back. They do not get the sensation. So, as you may all have noticed, how many times you've moved since the talk? Because you are uncomfortable, right? All of you, you're fidgety because we're uncomfortable. We get the sensation back. We were hot and some of you were fanning, yeah? Because we were feeling hot. All these sensations our patients will not have. They will not have these sensations going to the brain telling them, actually now you're hot, now you're cold, now you need to change position. So yeah, that's what it says. Skin loses its ability to protect itself against harmful things. Sensory impairment, they cannot differentiate between what is cold and what is hot. There may be a lot of time in the UK, patients can, they get the burned wounds just by being close to the radiator. Even the laptops can give them burn wounds because if you notice, you put a laptop on your lap, after some time it heats up, right? So, as a result, what do we get? Pressure ulcers. And Fiona has talked about pressure ulcers, so I won't go into detail.
And moisture lesions as well.
And moisture lesions. So patients with spinal cord injury, they would have incontinence, bowel and bladder, as Fiona had talked about. But what happens as a consequence to the skin? It keeps the skin moist, right? And that leads to moisture lesions, ulcers.
And also the natal cleft, the area of the natal cleft is very vulnerable when you're sitting all the time. So the natal cleft is this bit here. And where you're sitting all the time, you can get quite sweaty with the buttocks that are pressed together, and that can break down. And quite often it's become very sweaty, and then the patient is either hoisted or transferred, and both can cause the pulling apart of that skin area, and then it breaks down and you get a breaking open of that area. You can sit patients carefully if they have a split natal cleft, as long as it's high. You have to be very careful and not leaning against it. So normally anything like that would return someone to bed. And we've got a slide about that.
So this one talks about what are the areas, major areas that are prone to pressure ulcers. And if you see the back of the bottom, understandably because the sitting bones, because you all have changed position. Why? Because you get pressure under the sitting bones. Okay? The heel. Most of the spinal cord patients, as you said, bedridden. This term given, that means they spend most of the time on the bed. Where do you see the pressure coming? The heels, the back of the heels, right? In addition, we'll do a practical on whenever, look at Fiona. Where all do you think the pressure would be building? Where all do you think are areas that are quite prone? Sorry?
Yeah.
The sacral area, occipital, yeah. The head, shoulders, behind the shoulders, yeah. Elbow is another one. Yeah. So if you can see the pictures, this is the person lying flat. If you look at Fiona, as we talked about, then the person in the sideline position. So look at the areas where person could have. There we go. Look at the areas where possibly pressure could be building up over time, right? So the head, earlobes are very vulnerable areas, the shoulder. So basically the bony prominences that are constantly in contact with the surface, and where the tissue bulk is less, that's where your pressure points are going to be. So Fiona had mentioned these factors, intrinsic factors and extrinsic factors. So intrinsic, as the term applies, which are from inside the body. Extrinsic are the forces acting outside the body. So we talked about moisture because bowel and bladder incontinence will lead to skin being always moist around that area, making it vulnerable. Friction. So have you come across pressure sores where you think it's because of friction? Have you come across this term before? The skin, rubbing of the skin, being just rubbing of the skin on a rough surface, clothes itself, bed sheets. The creases of the bed sheets can lead to pressure ulcers. So that's the friction. Shear. Now that is quite. Fiona is trying to do that. If we, I think. Just a second. I think we can get the head up.
It's on tilt down, isn't it?
There's a little. Be careful, I'm really just. Would you like me to get off? Yes, please.
You have to rotate.
That is to.
Oh, yeah.
So
There you go.
now,
Oh, yeah.
you can explain the shape. Okay. You may have seen some patients in hospital or at home being positioned like this. Yes. So what happens over a period of time? Start sliding down, right? But Fiona is sliding at a speed of, they will not be sliding so so obviously, but what happens is the bone, there is this sitting bone, and then you have the tissues, the muscles, and then you have the force coming down. So the bone is static, the bone is, the tissues are being crushed by the bone and the force down, which is the shear force. And then that will lead to pressure ulcers. So that itself is one of the things that you can prevent. How do you think we can prevent that coming down? Have you come across it? And yes, and how have you managed that? So you see what we do in, we can block the knees here. You can put pillows. We can show that with the pillows. Okay. So we block the slide down. Yeah. And then there you go. Okay, so you can prevent that slide down. Now some beds have got a facility where the knees would come up, which we say knee break. So always when you use the headrest, use the knee break. But if you don't have the facility, then you use the pillows to stop that slide, okay? Intrinsic factors we talked about. Fiona has talked in depth about it, about how the changes occur in spinal cord injury, and then how the sensation and the sensation of temperature is not going back. So that is the skin checks is the key to it. Skin checks, we teach patients how to do skin check if they are able to, using a mirror, or if they are not able to, then they have a carer who does the skin check every day, twice. Do you agree? In the morning and evening. And if there are alarming signs, or there is a redness or anything build up, then what we suggest is to come off that area, take the pressure off that area, or if it is a moist area, then keep it cool and dry. And immobility, that's one of the things. So we may get a person in a very nicely, equally, the pressure is being equally distributed in a nice position, but it's not good enough. Because the person is not moving, no mobility, they would still build up pressure over a period of time. So turning them regularly, pressure relieving. So if is on bed, then we suggest that every 4 hours the person is turned and the pressure relief is done. It could be even more frequent if they are at early stages, 2 hourly turn. And as a part of spinal cord injury management, we increase the tolerance, skin tolerance to being in a position. So then we get patients through a procedure where the skin tolerance would be made up to 7 to 8 hours at a time, so they don't have to be turned at night. In spite of them having great pressure relieving mattress, we cannot stress enough of pressure relieving. That's in bed. We will talk about pressure relief in wheelchair in the next one afternoon or maybe tomorrow. Okay. So, I will just see them.
When we first put somebody in acute, we normally do 2 hourly turns for the first assessment time. We would normally put someone in a position and assess them side to side. So they'd be supine side to side, 2 hourly, and then check skin, because you don't know, everyone's skin's very different. Some people have very poor tolerance and they'll end up getting marking. Yeah, we'll do the, I thought the pictures were on there, the running man position and all the show. Are they on there? They've gone for a walk. We'll go through the different positions. One thing you can do, this is if you have somebody who is stable. If somebody's is an unstable spine, and I think that's a possibility that you will be managing people who are unstable, then what we were going to do was go through positioning for unstable. Do you want to do that? Is that now or is that later?
That's tomorrow.
That's tomorrow. So if we go through positioning for stable now, we'll do it unstable tomorrow. The other thing you can do is for patients who have high-level injuries, they're very prone to getting shoulder pain. It's due to the muscle imbalance around the shoulder girdle. So the patients report shoulder pain. They don't like going on their side. So they'll constantly say, can you put me back on my back? But the problem is you don't want them on their back all the time because you're just building up too much pressure on the sacrum. But even with the pillow position we just demonstrated, you're still putting pressure on the back of the shoulder and the scapulae and the shoulder and head. So we use a position which is half a turn, and what you can do is you can actually put somebody where they're moving their pelvis off but not moving their shoulders. So if I just show you that. So you do a 2-pillow lift there, and so what we'll do is we put them there, stay by just slightly turning you, just very slightly. All you do is use a small pillow, and
so that somebody can hold the microphone. So because we're recording.
Okay, right.
If you use a small pillow tucked in behind their back so that they're slightly, but they're not really on their shoulder, so they're not turned onto the side of their shoulder on their side. And then you can just lift, you've actually de-weighted the whole of the sacrum on this side, so there's only weight going through one side. And that way shoulders are not being laid on, so that you can do that side to side instead of doing a full turn.
So, and shoulder pain is one of the common complications that people get, because if they are on a sideline position, the whole weight is coming through the shoulder. So this is a very useful tip. So, why are spinal cord injury patients at risk of developing pressure ulcers? We can all now agree with these points that there is sensory loss, there's malnutrition that Fiona had talked about, incontinence, altered skin moisture, depression. They are sad, so they won't move. So that is a vicious cycle. Immobility is one, but then if they don't want to because they're so depressed, they wouldn't want to do what they are able to. Right, this is an important thing, and maybe so you can emphasize a bit at the early stage, acute stage, where patients have lots of tubes and what impact it has.
So again, this is another opportunity. This is a stable spine again. Unstable we'll show you later. But you've also got oxygen masks, lines going in and out. All of those things can get trapped underneath. They can get stuck underneath a hand. So, and that patient's not moving. So you'll end up with lines and tubes underneath arms that lay there for hours, easily forgotten and not moved out of the way. Being very careful, obviously, with catheter tubes to always make sure that they're cleared and out of the way and they're not lying in between knees. So it's just being really mindful of the likelihood of all those lines and tubes that could easily get trapped. And if you don't want to have to, if you've got a trachea and you've got all of the other things and the trachea dressing, and you don't want to keep turning on the side, and they might not like, I don't know, sometimes patients don't like it when they're on their side because it's pulling and they're not comfortable with their trachea, and the trachea dressing is not comfortable. This half-life position is better because then they're a little bit more square and the catheter mount isn't pulling on the tracheostomy side so much. So using that as an opportunity to actually give them a slight de-weighting, hip to hip, but not, and then you can go half hip, supine, half hip every 2 hours and then increase it. But you're not having to yank around with the trachea because sometimes it can be really uncomfortable if it's on your own side. And just masks, being mindful of the BiPAP mask. If you're using BiPAP, that can really create quite a lot of pressure. And if somebody's got, if they're very high level, they'd be fully ventilated. But it's just uncomfortable. So, and if you can't feel very much, if you can only feel from here up, and then you've got a great big mask on your face as well, there's so little of you that's actually available for anyone to touch and to feel normal. Just be mindful of that. Your patient can only feel this, and the only thing they can feel is when you touch them around here, and you've whacked a great big mask on. So just be very mindful of being careful thoughtful about how kind you need to be. And I very much use it, part of my technique, it's just a little tip that I use, but when I'm working with my patients and moving them, I always bring their hand and put it to their own face, because they may not be able to feel their hand, but they can feel their face. And that contact of skin to skin, I think, is a really important thing to do, so that they know where they are, and that, you know, that they can still feel themselves. And it's very emotional, and hands are always very emotional for everybody. So when you put a hand to a face, and I use that in my treatment, I always end up saying, let's just see if you can comb back your hair, things like that. So it's just a little tip, nothing to do with skin, just something else.
So what can we do to prevent skin complications? What do you think? Sorry? Barrier cream? Yeah? Did you say cream or?
No.
Yes.
We don't like barrier cream. Why?
Why
wouldn't we like barrier cream?
Moisture? Yes.
Moisture. So then you soften the skin and you move them and you shear, because they soften the skin. So we don't use barrier cream ever.
Hello. The other thing to be mindful of is that if someone has a grade 1 pressure ulcer and you're rubbing the skin, you're actually traumatising the skin more. So the rubbing injures the tissues even more. That's another top tip.
I think a wise man said, put anything under pressure. Put anything on the skin except pressure.
Yes, exactly.
So, thinking about what we talked today, what can we do to prevent pressure ulcers? Skincare, positioning, take the load off, look after the skin, look after the nutrition that Fiona had emphasized about, educate, hydration.
More and more. It's always lost.
You always check the fluid charts. Patients haven't been given any fluids.
They get a prompt from doctor. Yes, hydration, nutrition, education.
Excuse me. How much fluid do you think a patient needs every day? How much? 2 litres? So, 1?
1 to 2.
1? Okay, so I have a catheter. Okay. I've been outside, it's very hot. I've got my injury, I now have a catheter. And I'm constipated. You need to be pushing at least 3 litres of fluid, please. 3 litres, all right? Because and the more fluids you drink, then you're going to be less at risk of a urinary tract infection as well. Okay, because the kidneys are always producing urine all the time, but if it's only a small amount, you're going to get a lot of debris that's going to sit in the bladder. Okay, so you can use your body to flush the kidneys and flush the bladder. So then you're flushing the urethral catheter, so it's less likely to block, and you're less likely to get a urinary tract infection. And of course that will help with the skin, it hydrates the skin, but also it reduces the risk of constipation as well. Okay.
So that prevention is a team effort. This is not the nurse's job. It's not the nurse's job to come and give the patient the fluids. There will be a fluid chart, they will be monitoring it, they will be watching to see what's in. Every time someone interacts with the patient, if they don't have one of those lovely bottles with the sippy thing that they can access themselves, which is why we have them, by the way, that's why they were introduced. All our patients get given one when they come onto the unit, it's theirs forever. They get given their own fluid so they can always drink. Every time you see a patient, you are responsible for their skin, and we absolutely make it our team's responsibility. If you've been near that patient, you should have checked their skin. It's your responsibility. If they get a pressure ulcer, you're just as much to blame as anyone else. And you're saying, okay, let's just see, how long have you been on your side for? Check their chart. When were they last turned? Okay, when did you last drink? Have you had a drink? Okay, get them some drink. And that's everyone, that includes the doctors. They're not above giving someone a drink. They have hands, they can give people drinks too. So it's not hierarchical. We're all responsible for our patient, okay? And everybody contributes to the holistic care of the patient. And that way, everybody, every single person always does it. It becomes a culture. And then the family come in and they go, have you had a drink? And they go, go away, I've had enough drink.
And that is the multidisciplinary approach, involving the family, involving the carers, and then by doing all this, we're always emphasizing that how important it is for the patient himself to take charge. So if they know if I'm dehydrated, I would have so and so problems. Like Fiona mentioned a case, Mr. Shijit mentioned a case where the lady knew that she had to have the catheterization, and then she got another doctor involved to get it done. So this is why we emphasize on the education side of things. Right. So reducing pressure, we've talked about. So you know, but to reduce pressure, one needs to know where is the pressure going to, and that is why we just said, just look at Fiona and see what are the areas most vulnerable to pressure in lying flat and in side lying. When a person is in chair, when a person is in wheelchair, the pressure points may be slightly different. If you look at here, this is just to make it clear. When a person is sitting, where are the pressure points going to? Where do you think the pressure points are going to? Sacrum? Well, if he's sitting like that, then sacrum. But look at the points. Yeah, elbow, because it's resting on a hard surface, right? Wrist, the heels, what are here? Behind the knee, popliteal fossa. We've seen people with pressure sore here, because that's just resting against the edge of the chair. The backrest, pressure sores at the back of the shoulder blades, scapulae, that's a very common one. In lying as well as in sitting, the wheelchair, because it's the seat canvas. Collars. You've seen people wearing collars?
Collars.
Yeah.
Collars. Philadelphia collars.
Yeah. If they're wearing splints, we've seen people wearing hand splints or foot splints, because the splints have been on all the time. It's a hard surface pressing.
There's another scenario as well, when people get, when they've been injured and gone back home, they've got a fracture, and the doctor just, they've got a fracture, put a back slab on, just leave them there for, like they would do for anybody else, 30 days, 40 days, and then when they take the cast out, there's a big pressure also that has formed. So what we tend to do is we do it in such a way that we can check the skin every day. So you just bear that in mind. If ever you've got in your relative somebody who has had a spinal cord injury, anybody can have a fracture, you, me, anybody, including somebody with a spinal cord injury. So the way we treat is not just to put a plaster of Paris for 14 days and that's it. We just need to check the skin regularly.
So skin checks regularly, twice a day, and pressure relieving, take the load off, good food. These are just the key points to keep the pressure ulcers away. Sorry? Yes, types of clothing, breathable clothing.
Not nylon or
Seams, thank you. Seams. Be very careful about seams of clothes. So sometimes you would put on some clothes, particularly sitting in a wheelchair, that have really big seams or pockets, and they can belts that can really rub. And so it's just being thoughtful about. Eventually, people do build up their skin tolerance, and you can wear jeans and things, but you need to assess everything first. And the same thing about socks. So we turn all the socks inside out, and we put everyone's socks on inside out, because the sewn-in seams on the toes. And then you put them into shoes, you can't, so just little things, but actually just being really mindful.
And then with clothings, they can't be too loose, they can't be too tight. Like too tight is seams and pressure building up, but not too loose, because that will cause the creases as well. You wanted to say something? Yeah.
So we get rid of them, just get soft ones.
Soft ones, just being mindful again. And sometimes people have got something in their pockets, and they are sitting in one position, so that anything that
yes, I had one of my patients had a huge pressure also in the back, in the because they're the coin that had just been and they've been sitting on there for a few hours, and they had a huge pressure ulcer. You just have to be. Somebody told me that rehabilitation is just about attention to details, and you just have to pay attention, and that's what our brilliant nurses on the spinal units do. They just spend their time looking at all these small details, and the patients learn, and they become themselves extremely fussy about this. Do you agree, Mr. Churchill? Yeah.
The people mattress,
Yes.
The low air loss mattress, yeah. I think, again, with the low air loss mattress jumping, but we still will turn people on a low air loss mattress. Don't just leave them there unless you've got one of the ones that actually is very clever and does the whole turning thing itself. But that you'll still need to keep turning. And again, it's assessing how well they're tolerating and how their skin is, and then you can build up the times. But we still do the turns on the low air loss mattress, and we use those for patients that really are at risk, very slim and vulnerable and malnourished people. Yeah.
They need to be stable as well.
What do you do when you have a triple mattress on and patient keeps sliding?
That's what we just did, how to block it.
With the pillows.
Just block it.
With the pillows. Yeah.
And I've come across some of the beds where the foot end can come closer, so you can put pillows if the person is short. And yeah. So we've looked at that, but we've looked at Fiona in sideline, and we've looked at Fiona in lying flat on the back and the pressure areas building up. And what can we do? We don't need sophisticated items. All we need are understanding where and what can go wrong, taking skin or areas out of the load, and then distributing pressure and keep turning the person, keep moving, and you will keep the pressure ulcers away. Right? Okay? So do you think we've got some understanding of what we can do to prevent pressure ulcers? To wrap up, what can we take back?
Sorry?
Inspect, absolutely.
Inspect the skin regularly. Offload the load. Hydration.
Good nutrition.
Everybody's responsible.
It is everybody's job. Education, patient education, yeah? And turning, mobilizing, pressure relieving. No matter what mattress you're on, no matter what pressure cushion you're on, it doesn't take away the need of pressure relieving. Okay.
And what I would say is that very often we believe that we need very sophisticated beds, or we need sophisticated mattresses. In fact, I've worked for 5 years in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Romania, and we didn't have any of these sophistications, and we didn't have a single pressure ulcers in our hospitals once we started educating the people. So I think it's more about educating, and then we believe at times the people we're dealing with in Pakistan and Afghanistan, for example, they were not the most highly educated, but I think we need to distinguish between those who have been to school and those who have got natural intelligence. If you teach them, they will understand. And and we've told them to look after the skin, to look after the respiratory system, and they have done it brilliantly.
So we will be, yes.
There's a common practice of while treating the pressure area, especially while after cleaning, using talcum powder and sort of massaging the area. I mean, it has been done for years. What is your opinion of this?
Oh my goodness. I would say, my goodness. That's something that I've noticed in Mauritius. Everybody has got the talcum powder. We don't use this is supposed to be drying the skin. So this should be banned personally.
Not even the massaging.
Also, just bear in mind a lot of patients do have spasms and spasticity, so you've left them in a lovely position. and then something happens and somebody knocks their bed and they spasm. So again, be very mindful as a team when you're working in an area where you have a patient that's getting a lot of spasms. We're going to go through those positions. I was just
We will
saying
take
that to Shiva.
that in details.
We'll
talk
do
about
that.
mobility in the next workshop, joint ranging and things, and seating in another
Spasm
one.
Positioning. There's some good positioning with pillows on the bed for anti-spasming to keep people out of those patterns. But you just must be mindful that, you know, you walk away, you think you've left them in a good position. We use a lot of pictures. We use photographs of the patient in the right position, how we want them. They get put up on the wall and written on every 2 hours, this position, and then a chart.
Right.
We're
So
being told we've got to
we've been told of. So the lunch was served in the corridor. So maybe we can come back by 2 o'clock for a quick lunch and back by.
So what I would say, I would like first of all, before we forget, because I will forget, we need to say thank you to the clinic Fortis Garni and working. Because they allowed us to use 2 of the beds, and also the company Les Bons Soins has allowed us to use 3 of their brand new wheelchairs that will be using for the teaching purposes. So we need to acknowledge this, and also the family of people, all those who have sponsored the lunch and the dinner, the tea breaks. I'm thinking of Sunanda and David and family, etc. So thank you.